Hello, my name's Samuel Doolin. This is going to be part 2 to the arrest video. This is going to be telling what happened at the field office, at booking and jail, and just you're going to see a little more as far as the allegations go. And the real point of this is going to be to show you God's hand in all this, to show you just how good He is. At least that's the way I view this story. And so let me just jump right into it. So the last place I kind of left it off was we were setting the police cruiser. I kind of jumped forward, but let's go back to that. And then we're in the police cruiser, or the state trooper, and we drive over to the field office. And when we get there again, the state troopers, not the one that arrested me, but the other ones, the younger guys, they were real good to me. There was no qualms with them. We finally get into prison, or into the field office, and they place us in this room where there's this little room about 20 by 10, and then they have these little cells like dog kennels, and they have a glass window on them. And so they set us in there, and they make us take our boots off and our belt, and they leave us in there. And so they leave the room. There's some cameras on us, and I'm assuming it has volume because it says request help if you have a medical issue. So we're sitting in there, and me and my girl, we talk about it, and we just decide, regardless how you feel about the situation, we just decide that we're going to start giving God glory. Just do like Paul and Silas did, and just do what Peter did, and just in the good and the bad, just give Him praise. And so we just get down on our knees and just start praying. And we start praying and just giving Him glory and just singing praises to Him, every song I could think about. And just genuinely, we had a peace about the whole thing. We weren't worried about, oh no, what was this? We were just decided we were just going to try to have a good testimony about it. And so I'm busy, dusting away the glass because I have a ton in my shirt, and I'm dusting it off. I'm in my bare feet or my socks, and so dealing with that. And they come in, and I'm unhandcuffed. So they unhandcuff you and stick you in the cell. And so they come back in, and they come and they grab the guy opens my cell, and I step out, and he tells me to go stand outside in the hallway. So I step out there, and then he tells me to go ahead and walk down to the next door, and there'll be a fellow waiting for me. Again, I'm not handcuffed. I get in there, and it's a fellow named Special Agent Radovan. He's a fellow that works with the FBI and was a part of the big task force that arrested everyone for January 6th. And so I'm in there, and again, this kind of proves more to the point that they didn't actually believe I was dangerous, because if they believed I was dangerous, I would have not been unhandcuffed. It wouldn't have been a thing. And so I sat down in with him, and the first words out of his mouth is, hey, how you doing? I don't care about your case. Where's Johnny? And so I go ahead and tell him, I'm like, look, we already talked about this when I was in the Army. I don't know where he is, but if I did, I wouldn't tell you. And he's like, look, I'm just wanting to bring him in because, to bring him in safely through the sheriff's department. And as we were talking, I told him, we just had a little heart-to-heart, and I told him, look, we talked about this while I was still in the Army. Y'all didn't want to do that, which is right. Y'all didn't want to ensure that he was actually going to get a fair trial. Y'all didn't want to ensure that, Y'all didn't want to ensure, y'all were going to hand him over to the FBI, and y'all knew they were up to no good. We already had this discussion. So that ship's long sailed. And he's like, look, it's just going to come easier on him and whatnot. And we start talking about the oath. And I told him, I'm like, look, I can't trust you. Even if I did know him, I couldn't trust you because you lie to yourself. If y'all every one of y'all swore an oath, y'all either lie and broke your oath, y'all don't actually believe the Constitution, or y'all believe a lie and you believe the sheriff's department is under the authority of the FBI, or you believe the ends justifies the means. Therefore, the money you get from civil asset forfeitures or from red flag laws, taking in those firearms and stuff and selling them, the money's too good, and you believe the end justifies the means. Well, if we get this money, we can do better for our community, so you just let the feds do whatever they want. And so we had this conversation. He's like, look, it has nothing to do with all that. I'm like, I'm not asking a man to hold my conscience. That's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking everybody to do what I believe the Constitution says. That's not where we're having a problem. I said, if y'all at the very beginning, y'all knew the FBI was up to no good, you knew they were treating everybody like terrorists, it's not a question, it's not my beliefs versus everyone else. There's plenty of FBI agents and their federal agents that have quit because they're like, we're treating these people like terrorists and it's wrong. And they've quit their job. I'm like, so you don't believe they did it right. And I asked him, how would have you done it differently? Because they could have picked him up at a stop sign or picked him up while they weren't at home or something and not tried to push the narrative. But you let them defame them, turn the jury against them and all these different things where they couldn't get a fair jury. So what would you have done different if you were in charge? And he said, well, I'd probably done like you're saying, just picked him up somewhere. I'm like, then why didn't you tell them that? That no, y'all are not actually going to go in there and treat them like terrorists. This isn't going to happen to my citizens. I'm like, that's my issue with you. You don't even hold to your own conscience. That's where we have an issue. You don't defend your own citizens. That's where we have an issue. And I told him, we both swore an oath. You can dance around it and act like you don't know what that oath means. But in the end, I swore an oath too. If y'all aren't going to do your jobs, I will. That's just where I left it. And so we finished off the conversation there, and they took me back to my cell. And while I'm back in the cell again, we had waited, and we were being nice to them. We weren't being ugly. And they had gone to a point, we had asked several times through the camera, again, it had volume, and we asked several times that my girl had to use the restroom. And we did this over and over, but I could hear them mocking through the wall. They weren't going to do it. And so finally, they had left her a cup to drink. She had water. And so it came to a point where she couldn't hold it anymore. We asked several times, and over an hour or two span. And so they waited until she had to finally use the cup. Then they came in like, oh, did you have to use the cup? And, it kind of made me a little ticked off. And so after that, they started coming in more frequently. I don't know if someone got onto them or something, but it whatnot. So other than that, I didn't really have too much of an issue with in the prison. But going back to the main portion, we just go back to singing and praising God, and we start talking to each other about just how this is all going to go down and what this actually looks like, and just trying to keep each other comforted. And finally another fella comes in. I hear him through the wall. They've gone and tested guns and different stuff. I hear some crazy stuff about a full auto revolver, things that make no sense. And so again, we're sitting there, kind of snickering at this, and finally a guy comes in and a lady, and they're like, look, we're detectives, and so and so and so and so, I don't remember their names, but they're like, we want to talk about these firearms. And I'm like, they said, do you want a lawyer? And I told them, I'm like, I don't mind talking about stuff, but if until y'all prove that y'all had a reason to really pull me over, there's no reason to talk about anything else. So I'll wait on that lawyer. So anyway, I go to use the restroom, and the state trooper actually that arrested me and did all this stuff, he takes me out there. And while I'm in there, that detective comes back through the door, and he's like, look, if you have paperwork, just give it to me. I'm like, again, I'm under arrest until I figure out that lawyer thing, until we figure out if y'all had a right to pull me over. None of this really matters. He's like, and so he's frustrated, he leaves. And so again, I hear him talking about things they don't really understand. Just more stuff that proves they don't really understand the law. Talking about how even a gun has to have a serial number and stuff. It doesn't. In the state of Florida, You can have 80% lowers and stuff like that. And it doesn't require a serial number. It just shows that these people that are enforcing the law don't know the law. And so anyway, we go on from there. And so finally they go and they take us and they put us in handcuffs and they start, this is about, I'm going to say it's a good bit of time. Like we were arrested, I think around 7:30ish. Finally, actually the arrest happened, I'm assuming. We got to the field office a little while later and we booking around 4 o'clock, maybe a little earlier. So there was a good bit of time that we were there. And pretty much the whole time we were singing and praying. So they handcuff us and they start leading us out. And it's the fella that asked me if I was a sovereign citizen. Again, to reiterate this video. At no time did I talk to them and even mention that the guns were to use against officers. Never happened. Never was the state trooper actually afraid of me and the firearms. It never happened. I finally got the video, and again, it just reiterates. The man wasn't afraid. That's just a backstory. The second thing is, I never said I was a sovereign citizen. I actually said the opposite, that I wasn't. The man was trying to accuse me of it because of their training. And so, back to the story, this fellow is leading me outside, and he's got me handcuffed, and he tells me, look, I don't actually have to have you in these handcuffs. It's just the way I do things. So, again, reiterating, this man is not afraid of me. So they lead us outside. They put us in the vehicle, and I look over, and there's my brother. And he's there, and he's in the little minivan and whatnot. And, he has just found the place. Like, again, they arrested us, and they told no one, so he's running around trying to find us. And he finally finds us right as we're walking out, just by a miracle. And it was like a movie in our minds. We're just like, there he is. There's Michael. So Michael just has this presence about him. So the officers, there's the detective, and there's this fella, I'm assuming, that went and shot the weapons. They'll usually have a weapons expert, as per se, someone from the SWAT team or a Fed. And so so this guy's there, and this guy's in all tactical clothes. He's not in a uniform. He's just in like the patriotic ripped up flag shirt, and has his beard and everything. So stereotypical patriot look. And so he's out there, and this detective is out there, and the police officer calling everybody sovereign citizens out there. And so my brother gets out of the car, and he's asking hey, what is the charge? And he catches them off guard a little bit, because I don't think they knew that anybody knew where they were. They kind of just snatched us, kidnapped us, and basically disappeared with us. So they were a little surprised anybody had found them. So when he's talking to them, he's like, hey, what is his charges? And the guy's like, oh, I didn't really give him much. I just gave him 3 felonies or 4 or 5 felonies, whatever he said. And my brother looks at him, he's like, are you wanting me to thank you for that? He's like, you're telling me, if that's what you're charging him with, the whole machine gun stuff, if that's what you're charging him with it, then you're saying if the man would have paid $200 to the king or the government, that you wouldn't ruin his life? He's like, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. And he's like, no, that's exactly what you're saying. He's like, no. And he's like, You're not a patriot. You're dressed up like a patriot. You're not a patriot. You don't actually believe in the Constitution. He's like, well, yes, I do. He's like, I believe in the Second Amendment. He's like, no, you don't. He's like, I'm not here to argue with that. I was just asking, what were you charging with it? He's like, well, I didn't, that. He's like, so do you own a machine gun? The guy's like, well, no. He's like, my brother says, well, do you own one through the department? And the guy's like, well, yes. And he says, so because someone else paid $200 to the king, basically, you're allowed to run around with a gun. So now you can have your Second Amendment. And the guy's like, well, no. He's like, yes. He's like, you're a Fed. You're not a patriot. You're a Fed. And the guy, I don't know if it was him or if it was the fellow calling everyone a sovereign citizen, but someone yelled out, sovereign citizen. Again, that's their stereotypical phrase. This is, again, to prove that they just throw that out like candy. And So he's like, I'm not a sovereign citizen. And the officer that called me a sovereign citizen walked behind his car and tried to, get a picture of the license plate and call it in, again, trying to find something to arrest him on. And so this all happens. He sees it, it's going nowhere. He's like, look, I just came to find out what the charges are. And so he gets in his car and he leaves. And the other guys are over there offended that they don't keep their oath. And so the officer finally gets in the car and we're driving off. And he asks me, he's like, is that one of yours? And I tell him, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, was that one of your friends or your family or something? I'm like, I think it is. And so we go on our way. And but as we're driving, me and Tiffany are just having a good attitudes about it. We're just like, the Lord's going to take care of us in it, regardless of how this is. If I made a mistake, or if I didn't, I don't believe I did, but the Lord's going to take care of us one way or the other. It's in His hands. And so we're sitting there just enjoying the music. He has some music on and we're just enjoying ourselves. And the guy starts geeking out on us. He's like, where's your hands? Our hands are handcuffed behind us. It's very uncomfortable. You can't even sit back. And he starts geeking out. He's like, where's your hands? If they're in front of you, that's considered escape. Again, basically, they have so many laws on the books. They'll twist any of them to find a conviction on you. I'm like, look, man, my hands are still behind my back. He's like, what about hers? I'm like, they're still behind hers. And so he goes back about his business, but he's just kind of weirding out on us. And so we finally get to the station, or booking, and they take us inside. There's these glass rooms, all connected to each other, really big glass rooms, and they set us in there separated. And they bring in other fellas, some people for just, there's one guy had a game warden, and I forget exactly the reason. I think it was something to do with fishing. And I'm like, you're in here for what? And so just looking at the different people that come in there, I'm like, so you're saying that they're trying to ruin your life over that. And so I'm like, this is insane how much they've militarized just so many different offices, just made different offices from different units, not police officers, just so many different agencies. There's too many to number. And I'm like, that's insane. And so we're in there, and I'm in there with this guy, and finally they bring in this classroom of people, and we're still being booked. This classroom of people. And they're showing them through the prison and showing how it works. And we're just kind of on there on display. So finally, those people go on by, and they finally give us our orange jumpsuits and everything, and they move us into the next room, and the officer hands me off to booking. And this one thing I'll say about booking. The officers in booking and in the jail, at least when I ran into them, I don't know about anywhere else, but in the Frostproof jail and that booking facility that I was taken to, very professional and very, very mannered. They treated everyone very civilly. And so, what do you call it? At least the day I was there. And they didn't act like little Gestapo and micromanage you. You kind of just had free roam. And so I'm like, this is very surprising. The officers, I would say the officers that are in the jail and booking probably should be the ones on the street, and the ones on the street should probably not be there. And so they don't know how to treat their citizens. They don't act like brothers. They act like they're in Fallujah and everybody's a terrorist. And so, but booking, I would say, was very good. So I go in, and the officers there, they were like, yeah, I saw your report and saw what they charged you with. This is a bunch of baloney. This is a Second Amendment issue, a bunch of communist garbage. And so they were treating me real well. They're like, I'm probably the only, they're like, we're probably the only constitutional cops you're going to ever run into. And so I'm in there with them, and they're just treating me real well. And so they sent me, finally, they're taking me to get the picture, the mugshot. And I already know. I've seen this before. I saw how they treated my family with January 6th. And I'm like, I know Grady's about to take this picture. And it's because they like to put you in an orange jumpsuit, get an ugly picture of you, and then they have the officer, looking like the authority and the picture of honesty. So they already can make you guilty before you're even charged, and they taint the jury's mind before you ever see a trial. And so I'm like, I'm not going to let this happen. So I go ahead and put on a big old Christian grin, and the fellow's like, they don't like teeth. And I'm like, okay. So I take away the teeth and just give them a grin, and I'm like, Merry Christmas, Grady. So we go on, and we finally go, and we're sitting in the room, and I get my phone call. So not the one phone call, but they're telling you your charges over the phone. And as I'm talking to them, they say, well, the state trooper charged you with resisting with violence. And then the other officers, the Haines City police officers or sheriff department, charged you with resisting without violence. So the guy that wasn't even pulling me out of the vehicle said with violence. The people that actually pulled me out of the vehicle said without violence. So that tells you anything about how this is all working. So then they said, you're also being charged with a short barrel rifle, modifying or scratching off serial numbers, and having 2 machine guns. And I said to them, I'm like, so did you say Haines City Sheriff Department? And she's like, yes, sir, that's what I said. I'm like, well, that's weird. I was arrested in Polk County on Lakeland and Kathleen. So why is the Haines City Sheriff Department there? And so I'm just asking these questions. And so finally I go back, and they say my bond, and it's quite high. I forget the exact amount, but I think it was something like $12,000, if not $22,000, something in there. And so you only have to pay 10% of that if you go to the bondsman. And so someone had told me, if you get a bond, if you bond out, then there's no stipulations. But if they put you before the judge, then they can basically put you on parole, like a parolee, and remove your rights without due process. That's the way that works. And so the other thing they do is when you go into the place, they take any cash you have and throw it on a card. And this is done in the name of, not wanting to have to deal with that, the accountability of that money. The only problem is they then steal $40 or so of it for booking you, as if you came there to stay. And so without due process, regardless of you're guilty or innocent, they steal $40 of your money. And I'm like, well, that's wrong. This is a racket at that point. It's because even if you're innocent, they'll instantly make sure you go to booking before you get out, and then they might drop the charges. That's unjust. And so anyway, that happens. And so my father, he goes and he pays the bond. Well, we're sitting in there for an hour or two, and then I get my phone call, and I call him, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, well, her bond has gone through. They're not letting your bond go through. He's like, the bondsman said it went through and that he handed it over. So I told him to try it again. So he goes back and he gives the bondsman more money. He comes back and he's like, the bondsman paid, and the bondsman says it went through. So it's just a matter of time before the jailer lets you out. So I keep asking the jailer and the booking guy, and he keeps checking, and he's like, no, it's not going through. So it gets late, and they finally get my girl out there, and I was just praying for that. I'm like, Lord, I don't mind how long I stay in prison or whatever you do with me. Lord, just don't let my girl go to jail if you don't mind. That's the one thing I ask, because I don't want her dealing with all that and whatnot. So he got her out safe and sound, and I was happy about that. And so finally they come, and they're taking a bunch of us to jail, and so they do this twice, and both times I'm like, hey, my bond has been posted. It's either going to be tonight or tomorrow morning. And he's like, okay. About the third trip back and forth between the jails, finally the officer's like, look, you got to come with me. I'm like, all right. So I grab my bologna sandwich and my little toiletries they give me, and they handcuff us and stick us in a jail truck, and it's real confined. You can't be claustrophobic if you're getting in this thing. So we get in, and we're riding down there. You can't see anything. We get down, we get to the jail, and we're going through all these doors, opening up all these doors and getting us in. And every time he asks someone or tells us to do something, I'm just telling him yes, sir, and whatnot, and just kind of piping up. And finally, he's dropping everybody off. He uncuffs everyone, but then he doesn't uncuff me. He tells me, Doolin, follow me. So I'm following him. And the jailer's like, this is the first time in years that I've ever heard someone, use yes, sir, and, be polite the way you have, and, that often. He's like, what's your background? And so I tell him a little bit about me, being in the military and being a Christian and just being kicked out over the COVID shot. And he's relating with me a little bit. And so I tell him, he's like, why are you in here? I tell him that a state trooper just power tripped and stuff like that. And so we have a kind of a conversation. He puts me in the cell, and he takes off. Medical sees me, and they pull the probe, or they don't pull the probe. They check on me, and again, checking me out because I was tased. And then they send me back to the main block. So I finally get in where everyone else was taken, and they put me in, and I get my bedroll, and I go in, and it's like 1 to 3 o'clock. I'm going to assume about this time. And I go up the stairs, and so the setup of the rooms is, so you have the jail, the main room. Behind, there's an officer here at a desk, the security guard. Behind him's another room where they'll feed us and give us our lunch, and it's the classroom. In front of him are 3 rooms. Each one has a giant glass window where the officer can see everything, and each one of these rooms hold about comfortably 40 guys. And so you have the showers. It's a big stainless steel room, open, no privacy whatsoever, toilets, showers. Then you have the bunks, an upstairs and more bunks, and then a few dining tables up front. And so that one officer can kind of guard all of it from his one spot. There's no privacy, nowhere to hide. So you go in there, and I got my bedrolls. You're sitting there in your flip-flops, or, they give you little plastic flip-flops in jail, so just flop, flop, flop. You're trying not to wake everyone up. I get upstairs, and all there's open is top bunks. And there was two kids awake, or younger guys, I should say. And so one kid named Red, and this black kid named Red, and a little white kid, and he's like, they're kind of snickering. And so they call me over, and they're like, hey, psst. Hey, you, and they tell me to come over, and so I can see they're being mischievous, and so I go over there to them, and they're like, so what you doing on our side, and all this stuff, and so they're joking with me, I can see, and they go, here's an open bunk behind us, don't wake the guy underneath up. And so as I get in it, he's like, so why'd they stick you in with all the murderers? And so I kind of laugh at him. He's like, no, seriously. And I laugh at him some more. I'm like, pretty funny. And he goes, yeah, I'm just joking with you. And so I get in my bunk, and it goes pop. And so it didn't break, but it's sheet metal, so it pops. And it wakes up the prisoner below me. And so he's unhappy, and so he's throwing a fit. The other kid is vouching for me, and now the guy below me is letting him have it. Another guy wakes up, and he gets on to the guy below me and tells him to just lay off. And it just starts heating up. So I'm under the blanket, and I'm like, I'm just going to act like a kid when mom comes in to check to see if you're awake. And I just fake like I'm sleeping. I'm like, maybe this guy will just chill out. And so finally, one of the guys, get him to chill out. And then another fellow walks up, and he's like, hey, this bunk's, I see you're comfortable in for the night. He's like, just sleep. But when you wake up, this bunk's broken. If you could go somewhere else. And so I go ahead and do that. And so this is my few minutes in, but the guys ask me, like, what are you in? I tell them, and they're like, oh, you're that guy. So apparently, before I've even gotten in the room, everybody already knows what's going on. And so, again, everyone knew it was trumped up. Everyone knew this was, this baloney. But seeing how many lives were just being destroyed over nothing, just listening to their stories and stuff, it was heartbreaking. So we wake up, and we wake up 4 a.m. We eat breakfast, so again, small portions, and I just decide at this point, I'm like, Lord, I'm just going to be content, Lord, with whatever you give me. This could be the rest of my life, depending on what you do. I know that the FBI has it out for my family. I know the sheriff's department's not planning to do anything anyway. I don't know what's going on, but there's only one way I get out, is you, and if I stay here, it's you. You have control of my life. So, Lord, do your will, and I'm just going to be content. And I'm going to turn this jail upside down for you, for Jesus, and until Satan throws me out. This is the plan. So they give me the meal. I just enjoy it and just praise God. And I'm going about my day, and I keep running into these guys, and they're talking about their stories of how they've gotten into jail. And a lot of it was heartbreaking. You get to really see a lot of these guys are first-time offenses, or they've been here a lot, or their lives are just wrecked. Most of them do not have a father figure in the house. It's not a thing. Or a lot of drugs and stuff mixed in there. So, and a lot of them have they got the scriptures and they know the Bible. They've been digging into it because their situation, but they have no self-discipline, no self-control, and so just it's generational problems. You'll find out that their grandparents and their parents and then finally them and their siblings, it's just the whole family has had this struggles or drugs and just debauchery and stuff. And it's just really sad. And you're talking to them and they really want freedom from it, but they don't know how. And so I'm talking to them and I just tell them, I just start sharing the gospel with them. And so pretty much this whole entire jail, I keep running up to different guys, talking to them and just bringing up Christ, and they're very receptive. They wanted it. You could see it. And so I'm telling them about Christ and telling them just how to have true victory. And I'm like, if you don't know where to start in the scriptures, start in Romans. Because Romans, if you really grasp it, if you really just sit there and not leave it until you get it, it's the clearest version of the gospel. You'll learn the gospel. I'm like, grab a Bible and read Proverbs. Because if you read Proverbs and you really follow its commandments, what it says to do, you'll be wiser than anybody around here. Whether it be the jailer, anybody outside the prison, you'll be wise. It'll keep you from coming back in here. I've said, when it says something's foolish, run from it. If it says something's wise, chase it. I'm like, and so whenever, it's the mind of God. So if God says something sin, call it sin. Whether it be your parents are doing it, whether you're doing it, be honest and renew your mind. When God says something sin, consider it sin. When God says something's good, seek it. Seek God's face. And so that's what I tell them. I just tell them, in all your ways, just really acknowledge Him. Don't lean on your own understanding. I told them just really seek God's face and to put Him first in your life. Any problems you're having in your family or otherwise, it comes from someone rejecting a biblical principle, whether it be on purpose or by accident. It's just the reason all this stuff happens. I'm like, God wrote the book. He set up how the world works. It's going to run. You're going to reap what you sow. And I told them, really just seek God's face in all this. Put Him first in your time. Put Him first in your family. Put Him first in your finances and all these things. And God's going to bless that. And I'm like, but it's not a prosperity gospel. I'm like, you're going to suffer more actually as a Christian than a non-believer. And I told him, who the Father loves, He chastens. If a father truly loves his son, He's going to discipline him. He's going to discipline him. Also, He's going to let him go through hardships because He doesn't want him to be a child his whole life. He desires him to mature. And so God desires to use you in amazing ways. And a lot of that time is a hardship that teaches us to reject our childish thinking and to sober up and be men and to take on responsibility and help others. And so I'm like, be prepared for that. Look at suffering as a positive. Be content with what little God gives you. If He gives you little, be good with the little that He gives you. Honor God with your time and everything else. If God gives you much, use that to honor Him. Don't seek it, but be diligent, and God will choose which way you go with this. And so that kind of stuff. And so I'm just telling them this stuff, and I'm showing them how to, I'm making my bed like the military. I've seen in the military, and they're just enjoying that. And I just kind of give them that YouTube video where, if you make your bed in the morning, at least you'll have something accomplished in the day at the end of the night. And so all this, I'm just, probably doing more than I actually do at home. And so truthfully, but I'm trying to be a good example to these guys. And God just gives me a confidence like I've never had before. And He just gives me peace like I've never had before. And really, I'll say, I was the most rested and at peace I've ever been in my life in that jail. For those 3 days, it was like a vacation. It really was. Can't explain it. I had a joke with a fella that I was doing a discipleship program before all this happened, and at the end of it, I'm like, hey, there's prison ministries. Can I get in on it? I had a thought to tell the guy, hey, never mind, I found a shortcut. But so anyway, I'm running around, I'm talking to all these guys. And so again, I'm praying just constantly. Any guy that comes to me to talk to me, and I see there was one kid that kept coming to me with his problems. And I'm like, look, quit asking me. You already know what to do. Seek God's face. You need prayer. But I could see he didn't want to pray. But he also didn't want to say, Jesus is God. He wasn't just believing a random God. And so I kept talking to him about this. I'm like, look, the problem is you want to do it in your own strength. You're addicted to figuring it out. And you can't figure it out. You're addicted to a pity party. And you're not going to find it here. And I'm like, just find a corner and really seek God's face. And see if he doesn't show himself to you. I'm like, but he would go for 2 seconds and he'd run back to me and just, I don't know, he's not talking to me. You don't get it. And so little things like that. And so anyway, first day I finally figure out how to use, there's these computers in there. And again, to add more to the racket, you get your free phone call. But the reason they put you in jail and they do all these things, a lot of these people, they made it impossible to get out. Because if you have the cash on you, you can pay your bond. If you don't, you have to reach someone from the outside. And if that first phone call didn't do it, then it's now this computer thing. Even if you're in there for a while, the longer you stay, the more they charge you. They keep charging you for each day you're there. They charge you for extras that you get, whether it be food or toiletries and stuff. They charge you for the phone calls. You have to go through a certain service, and they charge you for the time you have, and to send letters or to receive letters. So it's just this big racket thing. And so anyway, all that being said, I'm looking at this kiosk and it tells me my charges. And they have a little library on law, but the library is garbage. Like you look through it and it's tilted one side. Like the Constitution, all those things, any real law is not in there. And so it's really just one-sided and made to where it's a hassle to actually defend yourself. And so I look at the kiosk anyway, and it tells me your charges. And it has no charges. I'm like, well, this is weird, because I was just told all my charges. So I check other computers, and they're all saying the same thing as far as for mine, but everyone else, they're working for it. So I knew it wasn't a fluke. Day 2 shows up. And again, I'm just singing and praising. I'm like, Lord, if you leave me here, you leave me here. If they're up to no good, but you're in charge. You can get me out if you want it. But I'm going to be content even if you leave me here. So I would look at the computer the second day. Still no charges. Still couldn't get a hold of anyone from the outside because that first phone call. And they don't know how that you have to actually put money on to make the phone call. They have to put money on it from the outside. So it's really, again, it's rigged against you. And so, especially if you're a first timer. And so, the second day, no charges, and I'm like, this is someone's up to no good. And they start handcuffing me and taking me to first appearance. And so we take about 2 steps, and I hear over the radio, send Doolin back. And so they send me back, and I'm like, that's weird. I wonder what that's about. I'm like, someone's messing with something. Someone's not wanting me to be able to bail out. That's what's going on. And so I come back and I'm like, Lord, I'm not going to stress if they're doing that or not. Lord, if you want me in here, I'll be in here. If you want me out, I'll be out. And so I continue just sharing the gospel and trying to help people. And so this goes on. There's a few more incidents that happen, but like, again, when I'm in my bed, I'm just singing. And again, God gave me favor with the inmates and gave me favor with the jailers. And like bar none. So every time I got a Bible, I'd ask for a Bible. You usually have to buy it. And I find it funny also, usually you'll find them with the New Testament and Psalms and Proverbs. Well, they don't have Proverbs in them. Like the one book I'm telling them to read, they don't have. And the one book that'll keep them from coming back in here, they don't have. And so I thought that was pretty ironic. And so I'm talking to these guys, and they freely give me Bibles. the trustees and the jailers gave me a Bible, and as fast as I get these Bibles, people want one. And so I'm talking to them, and I tell them to read this, and they're like, I don't have a Bible. I'm like, well, here's my Bible. And so I give them a Bible. And so this happens about 3 times throughout my course being there. And finally, the 3rd day shows up. On the 3rd day, I finally look at the kiosk, the computer, one more time, and it finally comes up with a charge, and it says, concealed carry without a license, but it says uneligible for bond. Again, no, not allowed to have bond. And I already knew what was going on at that point. I'm like, it's not a fluke. That wasn't one of my original charges. The reason I haven't had charges for 2 days is those other ones were federal. Someone's messing with this computer or my bond and not letting me out. And they put uneligible for bond for concealed carry. I've never concealed carried in my life. Like some people might have. But if you know me, most of the people around here, stores, the store owners, the sheriff's department, the LPD, there's a lot of people that know me and have seen me. And I've never concealed carried in my life. So it's ironic they threw that charge. It just told me they were just trumping up a charge. But then to have uneligible for bond on that, that's not an offense that you would not be allowed to get out on jail. That's not a violent offense. It's nothing, why would you have that unless you're illegally doing something? So anyway, I see that on the 3rd day. No other charges again. And so they finally call me and they're like, hey, first appearance. So they handcuff me and they start walking us that way. And they put us in this, I'm going to say 10 by 10, maybe bigger, 15 by 15 room. And while we're in there, they have about 15 to 20 of us in there. And they tell us, they don't tell us anything. They close the door, and I'm stuck in there with these guys. And most of them look pretty hard. And I'm standing up, and the thought hits me. And it just tells me, ask who knows the Lord. And I just tell myself, I'm like, look, I'm not saying anything stupid. Like, I'm not doing all this. I'm like, I don't want to look retarded. And then another thought came to me, and it was, well, if you're not willing to say this little thing about the Lord and be bold about the Lord, then what makes you think you're going to be bold before the judge? And I'm like, that's true. And so I look at them, and they're all kind of having their conversations, and I go, who knows the Lord? Kind of quietly, and they all kind of look up at me but don't say anything. And finally I go, who knows the Lord? And now they kind of sit back and kind of look at me, and one guy throws his hand up, and he starts having a conversation with me. And so all eyes on me. And so I'm talking to this guy and just sharing the Lord with him. And I don't even remember where this came from. I've never said this before, but the idea comes to me that you're going to meet the Lord one way or the other, whether you believe in him or not. You're going to either meet him as judge or advocate. And God is fully merciful and fully just, but he's not like a man's judge where he can be corrupted. He's going to be fully just, and he's going to be justified in your punishment. But he's also fully merciful. But mercy is not undoing judgment. So, if you murdered someone's family, the judge would be unjust to let you go, because that's not justice toward the family and the victim. And mercy is taking the punishment that you deserve. And so I talked to him about this. I'm like, if you reject him, you're going to meet him as your judge, and he's going to be justified in all that he does to you. I'm like, but if you receive him, you're going to meet him as your advocate, meaning he's going to be your stand-in. He's going to stand in your place, and he's going to defend you. Unlike unlike a public pretender or defender, he actually has your good in heart, and he's going to defend you. And so I get halfway through all this, and a fella pipes up. And so I call these guys the sons of Baal. So it's not someone that just disagrees, doctrinally. That's one thing. I have no problem with that. It's not someone that is, hurt or anything like this. These people genuinely hate hearing about God and hate you talking to anybody else about God. And so they just hate it. And so this guy pipes up and he's like, just starts cussing up a storm and just saying all sorts of profanities about God and just perversions. But then I start talking to him, and he's like, well, I know the Lord. I'm like, you just, cursed him, and now you're saying you know the Lord. I'm like, I don't usually say this, but sir, you do not know the Lord. And I'm like, you may know a Lord, and your father's the devil. And so we start this conversation, and I'm like, if you're not a son of God, and you're serving Him, and saved, then you are a son of Satan. You serve him. That's just the way it works. There is no if, ands, or but. There's no in-betweens. And so he goes on and he starts getting perverse with it and not even arguing. He's just being perverted. And so after a second or two, the jail finally opens up and they lead us into the courtroom. So the man was just trying to disrupt everything. So we go in the courtroom. I'm feeling, a little down. I'm like, Lord, did I do the right thing? Was I, how was I supposed to do it? So you're second guessing yourself. I'm sitting in the courtroom, and I was expecting a real courtroom, but they have a video call up. And so we're sitting in there. There's about 20 or more female inmates in front of us. There's us and about 25 of us in the back, males. In the video call, they have several different jails that have also prisoners on there. And so I see the judge gets down there, and he just starts hammering them, like first time offenses, all these different things, no bond, just wrecking people. And I'm like, goodness, just wrecking them one after the other. And so even reasonable people that had really nothing, just boom, hammering them. I'm like, goodness. And so I'm like, Lord, I don't stand a chance of this. So I'm like, Lord, I'm not going to focus on the judge, because it's not about the judge. The judge doesn't have a say in this. I'm like, it's not about the judge, it's not about a jury, it's not about anything, it's not about how I speak. The only way I stay or go is bound in you. And I'm like, Lord, you have full control of this. So I'm not going to even pay attention to the judge or what he's saying. I'm just going to pray. And so there's 100 people before me. I'm just going to continually pray. And so I did. So about an hour passes by, and finally they move us up, and a couple people were dragged out of the room. For when he says, have a good day, that means don't talk anymore. They drug him out of the room if they talk some more. So finally it gets to me, and the guy before me gets dragged out. I'm like, I'm praying, but I'm hearing all this, and I'm like, all right, Lord. And finally, the judge is yelling at one of the dudes or something, and finally the guard looks at me. He's like, hey, Doolin, it's your turn. So finally I stand up, I walk up, and I'm like, Lord, I could dance around issues. I could try to talk to appease this man. I'm like, but none of that matters. I've seen what they've done to my family and how it didn't matter what they said. They had an agenda to push. I'm like, I know that's how this is. But Lord, I'm going to say what's on my mind with boldness and not have regrets later that I didn't say what I wanted to say. And Lord, you're either going to give me freedom or you're going to leave me here. But either way, I'm going to serve you, but I'm going to be bold. So I go up, I go to parade rest, and the judge goes, Samuel Doolin, your charge is concealed carry without a license. Do you want a lawyer? And I say, yes, sir, I want a lawyer, but he's going to be my counsel. I will represent myself, because I've seen how many family, many friends, and other people in my life, they're being paid by the state. They're not being paid by you. And they all go to dinner. I mean, it's just like A Few Good Men. They're eating with the prosecution. They talk with the prosecution. They know the judge. They know everybody. They know all the lawyers. Everybody's working together. And I seen from in the military when I was kicked out, the lawyer's not there to fight for you. He's there to work for the court, and he already considers you guilty. He's just trying to figure out what plea deal they're playing. It's a game. They're playing a game to see if they can get it less, but you're still convicted. And so I say I want to represent myself. I'm not going to have him sign stuff that I would never sign. And so, anyway, backing up, I say this, and he goes, everyone just kind of gets quiet, and I ask him, sir, is that my only charge? And I'm being real respectful, and he goes, what do you mean? And so I just start naming off the charges. I'm like, well, I was told that I had, resisting with violence without, short barrel rifle, scratching off serial number, and 2 machine guns. Well, everyone behind me just heard Jesus man just say he had more charges than they did. And so it was pretty funny. So everyone's just kind of quiet in their seats. And he goes, the judge says, no, this is your only charge. And I'm like, whether I'm right or wrong, I'm just telling you a story. This is what I said. I told him, well, Judge, because if there's no traffic violation on there, then there was no reason to pull me over, and really no cause for this. And the man stops me and he goes, really, really bluntly goes, Doolin, I would suggest that you do not talk about your case. You're talking about your case. The only problem is Sheriff Grady is tainting juries and talking about everybody's cases. The FBI shares all the information they want. They share all their side. And he's been talking about everybody's case. And he's like, I know your case. He's reading a one-sided script, but he doesn't want you talking about it because, again, it's a video camera. And so it'd be recorded. And so he tells me this, and I'm like, sir, permission to speak freely. And he looks at me, he's like, if you represent yourself, you may. And so I finally go, thank you, sir, and I truck on. I'm like, well, sir, this is a video call. None of this is legitimate. You said I had, and he tells us. He swears us in, and they always skip this now. They're like, they skip, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help me God. And they remove so help me God. So I put so help me God in there. But he's like, the other thing they do is they told us that we have a right to a lawyer, but the lawyer's in his courtroom. And so he'll start working for you now, but you're not actually able to use him or talk to him. So I tell him, I'm like, this is a video call. None of this is legitimate because you say I have a right to that lawyer. He's not in this room. I can't talk to him. I can't whisper over that camera. And I tell him, I'm like, the other thing is I have a right to see my accuser, face my accuser. He's not in this room, and I know he's not in that room. I say, thirdly, I'm not sure how it happened or who's doing it, but I'm pretty sure bond was posted twice, and I'm pretty sure someone's illegally messing with the paperwork to keep me in here because they put, I tell them they put the charges without eligibility for bond. I'm like, people with a whole lot worse crimes have gotten out on bond with no stipulations. I'm like, so, as soon as I say that, the man goes, he cuts me off. He's like, Doolin, you're only charged with this. It's $500 or $5,000, so $500 to get bailed out. He's like, $5,000 is your bond. There is no stipulations. You will not have a lawyer. Again, I asked for a lawyer, and he tells me I will not have a lawyer. And he's like, good day, sir. Boom. That's it. And so I'm like, last time he said good day, the man got dragged out. So I just walk off. And the fellow's looking at me. He's like, one of the inmates looks at me. He's like, how'd you do that? And I just smile at him. I'm like, I didn't do a thing. God did it. And I'm like, I wouldn't go suggest doing that. And so he stands up. He walks around. He looks at the judge, and he walks back around, sits down. And it's pretty funny. So we're being let out, and I asked the guard as I'm being let out, I'm like, so he didn't give me a court date. He's like, don't worry about that court date. He just let you out of prison. I'm like, oh, okay, or jail. And so we walk back. And so we get back to the courtroom. So again, he told me no attorney, but he also overturned the bond by accident or on purpose, whatever it was. He wasn't supposed to let me out on bond. That was the whole case of this whole thing. The whole thing was they had, you've seen the news, you saw what Grady said. They illegally saw that I had bond, and legally they have to let you on a bond, regardless of what the charges are. Once bond is posted and it's paid, you're out. And so they can add charges, but you're allowed to fight from outside. So the fact that he did a trumped up charge and just threw it on and tacked it on with no eligibility for bond, all that's illegal. And so anyway, so I go back to my cell. And I'm like, well, thank you, Lord. Thank you for overturning the heart of the judge. And so I'm sitting in there, and there's this fella named Andy. And this guy has a huge black eye. He showed up the second day, I believe it was. And so I'm talking to him. I'm sitting there eating my food with him, and he seems like a nice guy, like in his 50s or something. And I ask him about the eye, and he tells me one of his sons they got in a discussion, and he punched him. And I'm like, that's no good. I'm like, what for? And he tells me, he's like, well, his son's 27, and he has another son that's 30, and they smoke pot. And so they're lazy. They don't work around the house. They don't have a job. They just kind of live in there. And he has two younger kids. One's kind of got Down syndrome or autism or something, and he was just really missing them. And so I start talking to him about, the Lord again, tell him the whole read Proverbs and Romans. So this is just my constant saying. and putting the Lord first. I'm like, did you try to raise them in the Lord? Like, were you a Christian at the beginning? He's like, I tried. And I'm like, that's understandable. I don't know what happened. And I tell him, it's usually a principle missing. And I'm like, you want to go spend time with these younger kids. I'm like, there's nothing you can do for the older ones. They're set in their ways. If he's punching you and attacking you, regardless of how that works, you need to throw him out of the house. Not because of all this, but throw him out of the house for his own good, because he's learning to be lazy. Everyone thinks that, pot doesn't do anything to you. It kills a man's drive. It kills his manhood. It makes him not want to actually face and attack life and to actually help others. It makes him lazy. I'm like, so for his own good, throw him out of the house for your kids' good, so you can spend time with your other kids and try to raise them right, people that want to be helped. And for his own good, he'll hate you at the beginning. Both of them will hate you at the beginning, but if they turn their lives around, they'll love you at the end. I'm like, so that's what I told him. So another fellow walks down, and he's like, pray for me. I want to get out of here. So we start praying, all three of us. And I'm like, Lord, if it's your will, I don't know, what the case is or who's guilty, who's not guilty, what the case is here, Lord. But we ask for your mercy, because none of us deserve that. None of us deserve mercy, but we ask for mercy. And so we just pray. And I was trying to teach him what the Lord has been teaching me, not to pray really about myself and for myself, but for his will in my life, what he wants out of this. How can I use this for him and for others? And so we start praying that way, and he gets up and he walks away, and the other fellow's crying, and so I'm just talking to Andy and just encouraging him. And so that's how I ended up giving him my Bible also, and I ran into another fellow. And so this fellow, I had asked him, like, what was he, I was being nice, and I said hi to him, and I asked him, like, why he's in for. And so he gets all mad about that. And he's like, you don't ask people why they're in here for. And so I'm like, all right. And so I get to talking to him. He's got this real big, brainy book. It's one of those books. And so he's talking to me and tells me he used to be on drugs his whole life, but now he's clean and all this stuff. And so we get to talking about the Lord. And he's like, well, I don't believe in God. And so he goes down this long trail of, hating God. But then I get to talking to him and talking about morality and, the standard and different things. And he goes, well, I believe in God. I'm like, you just told me you didn't. He's like, well, let me explain to you where I met God. I'm like, okay. And so he's like, do you want to hear it? I'm like, sure. So he starts telling me about how he's a psychic, and God is really just showing him he was a psychic, and then telling me how he got into tarot cards and all these stuff. And I just stopped him. Like, it's been a couple minutes listening to this garbage, and some of it's just random, just perverse mindedness. And I just look at him like, I'm going to stop you real quick. You're going to tell me all this stuff. You're going to fill my mind with mush. And then at the very end, you're going to tell me how the God you met was you and that you're God. Is that right? And he's like, well, you haven't heard me out. I'm like, is that the case? He's like, well, you haven't heard me out. I'm like, that's fine. I'll hear you out. So we continue. And sure enough, at the end of the story, he finishes off with basically, life sucks. Anything is moral. You can even kill someone, and it's moral. It's okay. But blank God, and there is no God. I'm God. That's how his thing went. He shows me a letter that he sent to his boy that was the same stuff, and I'm like, finally I look at him like, your problem is, I noticed that you added all religion to this except the God of the Bible. You won't have that. And I'm like, and you're too smart for your own good, or you claim to be smart. I'm like, but you know where this ends, and you won't have morality, because everywhere else it allows you to be the God and you to dictate morality, because you don't want to stand for what you've done that's been wrong. And so he gets scowled on his face, and he's just cussing me out, and he's like, God's nothing but this and that, and starts cussing God and talking about hurts. I can hear him talking about hurts in his life, and I'm like, look, so what you're saying is that you're hurt. Someone's hurt you, and therefore you're blaming God. And so we go down this path, and he turns into, I'm God again. I'm like, okay. I'm like, let me just be straightforward, because I love you. I'm going to tell you the truth, regardless of how you feel about it. I'm like, you don't know God. You serve Satan. Your father's Satan. Your mind's been blinded because you've been on these drugs your whole life, and you're acting like that doesn't have anything to do with stuff. it's messed with you. You don't want to stand for, you're mad at God because someone hurt you in the past, but then you turned around and you're doing the same hurt to other people and you expect God not to judge you? I'm like, that's the reason you don't want God in this. And I'm like, because the fact is, you're not the victim. You're actually the person that's doing the harm too. And so he gets mad, and then finally I'm like, look, I'm not here to make you mad. And so we start praying. And so I pray for him. I'm like, Lord, just heal him and show yourself real to him. Lord, if he's willing somewhere, if it's something that's just missing, show it to him and show him mercy. I'm like, and so I just pray for him to be, God to heal that hurt in his past and stuff, and just show himself to him, and just to break his mind, because he's just too smart for his own good, basically. And he starts crying, and so that's where I leave him. So we go on anyway. So all this happens. That would be where I say the second sons of Baal thing was. And so I go on my way, and finally they call me, and it's time to leave. Everyone's saying goodbye. Everybody knows me. There's a couple guys that tried to help me out in jail also, getting phone calls out. And my family had talked to me over the phone. It was telling me some of the perverse and lies and stuff over that had been spread about me. And so I finally get out, and my family meets me. It's 5 in the morning. And it's 5 in the morning, and I finally get out, and I sleep most of the day. I finally wake up, and about 5 at night, same day I'm let out, I get a call from the bondsman. The bondsman's just fired up, just mad at me. He's like, why haven't you called me, all this different stuff, and just mad at me. And I'm like, look, I don't know how all this works. This is my first time. And he's like, look, you're just money to me, all this different stuff. And he's just mad. He's like, you're not allowed to run around with all your freedoms and stuff. You've got to, life's different for you. You've got to come in here and sign some stuff. And I'm like, okay, I don't mind, sir, but I'm just going to be bold with you or truthful with you. I'm not even supposed to be out. God got me out. And I know what's going on is someone's calling you mad that I'm out, and they're telling you to tell me to come sign away my rights. And I know that's the case. They want me to sign away my gun rights, or put me on an ankle monitor, whatever they want to do, or have stipulations where I can't go do or work or something, so that they have actually something to throw me back in jail on if they so choose. And I'm like, charges does not mean guilt. And so just because the police charged me doesn't mean I'm guilty. You're innocent until proven guilty, because he was saying the other thing. He's like, you got to prove your innocence. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm like, it's the other way around, sir. We are under the Constitution. If we were in any other country, you'd be right. But we're under the Constitution. We're in the United States. So I'm like, if that's not the case, throw me back in jail. That's fine. I'm like, but I'm not signing away my rights. And he's like, well, you got to go to second appearance. I'm like, the judge didn't say that. They messed up. And I told him the whole story, how, because I finally heard the news story, and I'm like, look, they arrested me, they threw me in here. I'm not sure if it was, FBI messing with stuff or not, or what it was, but anyway, I'm in here. The state trooper lied, the sheriff's department lied, and said things that were obvious lies, not even by accident, not, fluffing the story, straight up lies. I'm like, so they then went and Grady illegally, ignored the bond and put a charge that was trumped up. And I'm like, all this is happening. And he's like, well, this is a big thing, and I can't let you run around with your freedom and stuff. I'm like, look, the judge said, and what the judge said is all that matters. I'll call them, but I'm not going to go and sign away my rights to the court. The judge said, and what the judge said is all that matters. I'm like, that's all that matters. He made a mistake or he didn't make a mistake. No one let me out of that jail. God opened up the doors. And so this goes on, and so this goes on for a second, and he's still trying to convince me, you don't have rights, you have privileges. And so when you do something wrong, you lose your privileges. I'm like, no, sir. When you are convicted and guilty, then you may have lost something. I'm like, but a right is not given by the government. It can't be taken away without due process. I'm like, maybe you paid my debt as a bondsman and stuff, so I'll come in and talk to you. I'm like, the Lord got me out and he put you in my path, and so I'll come in and talk to you, and we'll see where it goes. Maybe the Lord will change your heart tomorrow. And so I start explaining. I'm like, it's not me versus Grady. That's what everyone doesn't get. Grady doesn't know what he's talking about. He deals with the news, but he set this machine rolling, and he really doesn't have anything to do with it. He's just the face figure. People come up to him and hand him stuff, and he reads it off. So someone's lied to Grady. And if I can, once I prove that Haman's lied to him, and Haman from the Bible, where just trying to kill Mordecai thing, I'm like, once I prove that there's a Haman in there, he's going to hang him. Once he finds out that someone put his sheriff's department in danger and me in danger, he's going to turn on him. And so it'll no longer be me versus Grady, it'll be me versus the charges, as it should be. I'm like, and so once he starts hearing this and I start explaining what actually happened, he starts calming down and starts talking more reasonable, and he starts telling me how to kind of win the case and different things, and just ideas anyway, things that are the way the law usually runs. And so finally we leave it at that. The next day I was supposed to go see him. He wouldn't call me back and whatnot, so I just believe God just changed his heart. So someone was calling him and putting pressure on him to get me to sign away my rights, because they knew they had done wrong and they were up to no good. That's the way that worked. And so it's hard to defend yourself from inside the jail, and that's the way they want it. It's sad, but the justice system is not just. It was designed to be built on God's principles, but they've thrown God out of the court. So do we expect justice where where God is not even recognized? So again, I saw a lot of people being wronged. I saw where the justice system had been tampered with and just becoming a racket and stuff, and it was sad, but it is the case. Most of us are too comfortable with our lives, and we're not worried about the other people going on, what they got going on, because we feel like they're guilty because what we're shown on the news. We don't actually love our brother. That's the sad part. So anyway, so that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. I'll do some more videos. I'll backtrack to me actually being in the Army. I'll go ahead and prove some of that, even though I really don't think I have to. But I'll prove that, show some of the paperwork and stuff, and just tell you the story of me getting kicked out, and so you know a little bit more about who this guy. Some of you already know me. Some of y'all don't know the story. Some of y'all have seen me, but you don't know who it is. So just a little bit more of who I am, why I do what I do. And then I'll start doing some videos on why America is why we're in this mess that we're in, how we got here. And so, again, I just want to say God bless. Thank you for listening, and y'all have a Merry Christmas.